In 1792, the US Mint was officially created and started to create its very first pattern coins. Now, a pattern coin is essentially a test piece of sorts, a coin made to test a new design, a new metal, or a technique that has not yet been approved for general circulation. The first of these coins minted by the fledgling mint in 1792 was the silver cent-a-cent, an attempt by the mint and its founding officials, chiefly Mint Director Rittenhouse and Chief Coiner Henry Voigt, but who also included indirectly Thomas Jefferson as the Secretary of State and Alexander Hamilton more directly as Secretary of the Treasury, in order to correct let's call it a mistake by Congress when it drafted the Mint Act of 1792. It demanded a 1-cent coin that would be far too large and heavy to be practical for everyday use. The idea was simple: to retain the intrinsic value of the metal, but simultaneously shrink the coin down to a size that would be something more practical. They used a 1/4 cent worth of copper and inserted a plug of silver in the center of the coin that is worth 3/4 cent, inadvertently creating the US Mint's first bimetallic coin in the process. In December of 1792, Thomas Jefferson presented 2 of these coins to President George Washington in order to prove the point that the copper 1 cent that Congress demanded was simply impractical. The exact mintage of these coins is unknown and was never officially recorded, as is true for so many things in the Mint's early years. But today we can positively identify 12 examples that have survived, with one further example which has some unresolved questions surrounding its authenticity, let's just say, and then one coin that is missing the silver plug in the center completely, for a total of 14 coins, in addition to a handful of historical accounts that remain unaccounted for in the modern population. The dubious coin is graded by NGC with a details grade of VG. The surface is badly scratched, and the supposed silver plug is actually an unknown metallic alloy of some type, so that's not right. What makes this coin's story even more bizarre is that it was bought at a police auction of unclaimed and seized property in 2006 for $400 by a California collector. It was last sold in 2020 for the sum of $52,800. The coin that is missing the silver plug in the center of the coin does appear to be unique, as only a single coin like this is known to exist today. It is possible that this might have been a pattern or a trial for the silver cent pattern, or simply that it was left over and no silver plug was ever inserted into it for whatever reason. It is housed in an NGC slab and has a grade of MS62 red-brown, and like the coin just discussed before, questions do remain, but it sold at auction in 2015 for $446,500. As for the coins that are unquestionably authentic, with established provenances, this example of the silver cent-a-cent is the finest known at a grade of SP67 brown, and was sold in 2021 for the sum of $2,520,000. The next step was then to create a coin that was, well, more practical to mint on a larger scale. So, in effect, they minted the silver cent-a-cent without the silver plug in the middle. The initial idea was to mint the coin from an alloy called billion, which is, in this case, melting the silver plug into the copper to create what some people call a fusible alloy. The problem was that the amount of silver was so small that there would be absolutely no way to distinguish between the billion alloyed coin and a coin simply made from pure copper, something that was already predicted by Alexander Hamilton in a report he wrote 2 years prior in 1790, and, I quote, "A consideration of the expediency of uniting a small proportion of silver with the copper in order to lessen the bulk of the inferior coins. The convenience of size is a recommendation, but the Secretary is deterred from proposing it by the apprehension of counterfeits. The effect of so small a quantity of silver in, comparatively, such a large quantity of copper can easily be imitated." Basically, the risk of forgeries being created was far too great. Now today, we know of 9 examples of this pattern coin having survived. That makes it rarer than the far more popular silver cent actually. Some references may list more examples, but one of those has since been proven to be a forgery, and another that was housed in the collection of the Massachusetts Historical Society has since apparently gone missing. Also, thanks to modern non-destructive metallurgic analysis, we now also know that most of these surviving coins were in fact not minted in a silver-copper bill and alloy, but instead from just regular copper. I guess proving the point that you won't be able to tell the difference on sight anyway. In 2019, the 1792 pattern 1-cent coin was sold at auction. Housed in a PCGS slab with the grade of SP53, it managed to raise the amount of $552,000 by final call. Then came the large cent patterns. These were the coins made in accordance to the mandates as set forth by Congress in the Mint Act of 1792, or as Thomas Jefferson puts it in a letter to President Washington in December of 1792, the real cents as ordered by Congress. 4 times as big, referring to the fact that they were and are significantly larger in both size and weight when compared to the small cent patterns or the silver cent pattern. Today, these coins are referred to as the birch cents, owing to the engraver's name of birch appearing in the truncation of Liberty's bust, just above the 1 and the 7 of the date. The identity of the artist, however, is not as certain and has been attributed to at least 3 different people over the centuries. Robert Birch, which is the most likely candidate, William Birch, and Thomas Birch, though the latter was only 13 years in 1792, so that discounts that possibility to some degree. It has also been suggested that the obverse imagery of Lady Liberty was meant to resemble a younger Martha Washington, but there's no actual evidence of this. I mean, you can compare the design to a portrait of a young Martha Washington, then still Martha Dandridge, and then just decide for yourself. But keep this in mind, and I'll address it in a little more detail a bit later on. The discussion surrounding the surviving population of birch cents gets a bit convoluted and complicated at this point, and certainly goes well beyond the scope of this video, but suffice it to say that there are at least 11 surviving examples of the birch cent known today that at least everyone agrees is genuine and has an established provenance. These are spread across 3 different varieties, all 3 coins struck in copper. The first has a plain edge with no inscription or reading on it. In past, it was thought that there were only 2 examples of this, Judd 3 plain edge type, but more recent research by Saul Teichmann makes a very convincing argument that those are in fact the same coin, not the least of which is the fact that the second example, the Kossoff coin, has not been seen since 1962, meaning that this coin is in fact unique, the only known example. It was last sold publicly from the Archangel collection in 2018, where it was graded by PCGS as AU58, where it sold for $660,000. The next coin, the Judd 4 birch cent, is identical to the one just described. However, it is distinguished by the addition of an edge inscription that reads, "To be esteemed, be useful," with 2 stars separating the 2 parts of the phrase. This is also the more plentiful of these varieties if you can even call it that, with 7 examples that can be positively identified. The example that we are looking at right now is the finest known example of the type, graded by NGC as MS65 star red and brown, and it was last sold publicly in 2015 for the sum of $2,585,000. And then lastly, the third example of a birch scent is again identical to the previously described example, only on this coin the edge inscription only has a single star, in other words, to be esteemed, be useful, and then a single star, to let the holder know where to start reading essentially. Here we only have 3 examples that are traceable, and this does include the Parmelee coin that was previously misidentified due to damage on the coin's rim. In 2016, the Norweb example of this particular coin sold at auction, housed in an NGC slab with the grade of MS61 brown. It raised $517,000. Now, one final coin that can be attributed as a birch scent is this example that is struck from white metal, which is, for numismatic purposes, basically a pliable, nondescript alloy made to strike test pieces. The coin, interestingly enough, instead of having the denomination below the reef, bears the inscription GWPT, which stands for George Washington President. This is a holdover from an initial draft of the Mint Act of 1792, submitted to Congress for debate in January of that same year by the founding father Robert Morris, whose signature also appears on the Declaration of Independence. Passage concerned was removed from the final act and reads as: upon one side of each of the said coins there shall be an impression or representation of the head of the President of the United States for the time being, with an inscription that shall express the initial and first letter of his Christian or first name, and his surname at length, the succession of the presidency numerically, and the year of coinage. However, George Washington himself is said to have been vehemently opposed to this idea, as he feared that it would lead to the creation of a type of American royalty or political elite that had a stranglehold on power, exactly what they fought the Revolutionary War in order to get away from. This is the only known example of this coin that exists, and it was last sold publicly in 1981 when the Garrett collection was sold. At that time, it was sold at auction for a tremendous $90,000. If it were to appear on the market again today, I have no doubt that it would exceed $1 million at auction with ease. There is some amount of debate as to whether or not the 1792 silver half diem should be counted as a pattern coin or not, but for the sake of completeness, I will include the coin here. On the one hand, the coin was technically minted before the mint was ready to start large-scale coining operations, and was only minted once and then never issued again. Now, there has been a lot of misinformation surrounding this coin over the centuries. One of the best was, once again, that Martha Washington supposedly posed for the opera's portrait of Lady Liberty. Remember, the same as with the birch scent portrait? Or that perhaps George and Martha Washington donated their household silver flatware and silver serving trays in order to be melted down for these coins to be minted. These claims can be traced back to, at the very least, 1860, when Mint Director Snowden wrote in a description of ancient and modern coins in the cabinet of the United States Mint, where he said, "The bust of Liberty is popularly supposed to represent the features of Martha Washington, who is said to have sat for the artist while he was designing it. This piece is said to have been struck from the private plate of Washington, which is not unlikely, considering the great interest which he took in the operations of the infant mint." The claims have since been scuttled as popular fiction without a shred of evidence behind them. However, it is further confused by a later discovery of a document that is known as the McAllister Memorandum that records a conversation with Adam Eckfeldt, who was a high-ranking official at the Mint during those early days, where he claims that George Washington deposited $100 worth of silver to have 2,000 of these coins minted that Washington could have then distributed personally. I'm not going to go into the complicated details here, but suffice it to say that the story has some serious holes in it, and it doesn't hold up particularly well under scrutiny. On the other hand, something that does hold up and has actual evidence is the story that the coins were minted under the direction of Thomas Jefferson instead, not the least of which is Thomas Jefferson's household account book itself, where he records that he deposited $75 at the Mint for coining on July 11th, 1792. This was probably in the form of silver bullion of some kind or the other, and then received 1,500 of the new half-dimes 2 days later. We also know that he immediately began to spend these coins on his way home to Monticello. Today, most of the coins that remain of this particular issue are well worn and show signs of circulation, with a surviving population of between 250 and maybe 400 coins if you're being more optimistic. The idea that these were treated as circulating coins is then again further reinforced by George Washington's State of the Nation address that he gave on November the 6th, 1792, where he remarked that in the creation of the National Mint, there has been a small beginning in the coinage of half-dimes, the want of small coins in circulation calling for the first attention to them. By example, a PCGS graded example of this issue with a grade of F15 was sold at auction in 2024 during the Central States Show for the sum of $102,000. But in 2013, the Floyd Star example of the coin, graded by PCGS as SP67, was sold at auction for the record-setting $1,410,000. So I think that lays a fair foundation for the argument as to why the 1792 half-dime should be considered as a circulating coin and not, in fact, a pattern. But the same can, however, not be said of the next coin, which is of the same design, but instead struck in copper rather than silver. So it is not unfair to say that this is to be considered as the pattern for the 1792 half-dime, probably minted in order to test the dies before minting in silver, as silver was in short supply. This coin is also unique, as only this one coin is known to exist today. Graded by NGC, it was assigned the grade of AU55 Brown and was sold at auction in 2015 for $824,850. Next in line is the dime, or dime, whichever you prefer. The reason the word is spelled differently here with the addition of the S before the M is that when the Founding Fathers wrote the Mint Act of 1792, they chose to use the Old French term dime, meaning a tithe or a part of 10 or 10 parts. So, 10 cents make up a tenth of a dollar, that kind of thing. In later issues, the S was dropped in favor for the more simplified dime that we know today. These first dime patterns, though, are exceedingly rare. In silver, there are only 3 coins known to exist. Historical records indicate that there may have been a 4th example at the turn of the 20th century, but that coin is either lost completely or entered in a private generational collection. 2 of these coins are badly damaged. One appears to have been deliberately scratched up rather severely, and the other was tooled post-mint in order to remove the date for some reason. And then the third, the Judd Patrick example, is actually in decent shape. Graded by PCGS as AU50, this coin was sold in 2016 for $998,750. The same coin is then also known in a copper strike, with this being the most plentiful of the various 1792 pattern coins, assuming that you agree that the classification of the silver half diem as a circulating coin instead, of course. Still, with fewer than 24 or about 20 or so of these coins confirmed to have survived today, this population is spread out across two varieties, one with a regular reeded edge and another with a plain edge. The reeded edge is the more accessible of these, and in 2022, this example, graded by PCGS as MS62 Brown, was sold at auction for the price of $900,000. The plain edge variety, again by contrast, only has 3 examples that remain extant, and none of these coins were ever issued for general circulation. This coin, graded as MS64 Red Brown by NGC, is the finest known of those. It was sold in 2015 at public auction for the sum of $1,057,500. The pattern for the 1792 Eagle on Globe $quarter coin was in previous years mistaken to be a pattern for a 1-cent coin. In fact, there was much about the coin that remained unknown for many years. Today, we believe that upon preponderance of evidence, the coin was likely designed by the American artist Joseph Wright, not to be confused with the English artist by the same name. In September of 1793, Joseph Wright fell ill with yellow fever and asked that his neighbor prepare a bill and submit it to the US Mint in Philadelphia. It reads, and I quote, "2 essays of a $quarter cut by direction of David Rittenhouse, Esquire, and presented to him. Broke in handling, value about 40 guineas. Now, David Rittenhouse was the first director of the US Mint. There is also further mention of a medal, which is likely the Henry Lee Commissia Americana medal, but that falls outside the scope of this presentation, so let's just leave that alone for now. Also, on a more subjective note, the obverse engraving of Lady Liberty bears a remarkable resemblance to Wright's wife, Sarah. This is an unfinished family portrait from 1793, and you have to admit the resemblance is definitely there. Today, only 2 examples are known to exist in copper, one of which is in the National Numismatic Collection in the Smithsonian, leaving this example, graded as MS63 Brown by NGC and sold at auction in 2015 for the sum of $2,232,500. In addition to these 2 coins, there is also another 4 examples of the Eagle on Globe quarter pattern known to exist in a white metal striking. Amazingly, 2 of these coins were discovered in the collection of the New York Historical Society in around 2003, following a complete inventory of the numismatic collection. They had no idea that the coins were even there, nor any record of how or even when they entered into the collection. In 2021, one of these rare coins was sold at auction, graded by NGC as AU58 for the sum of $1,260,000. So those are all of the official pattern coins for 1792. There are other examples as well, such as the privately minted Getz patterns, for example. But, let me know if you want to see something similar on those coins as well. Subscribe to WNN and activate notifications with the bell icon to know when new videos are released. For the World Numismatic News, I am Numisman saying thank you for watching, keep collecting, and have a fantastic day.